We defined an idol as anything or any one of God's gifts that's inflated to function like God in our life. So you just fill in the blank of all the many gifts that God has given us, but it's anytime those things, we're looking at them and our heart is looking at that thing and saying, I need you to produce the security and the sense of significance, me being a somebody, happiness, joy in my life. I need you to produce these things, not God. And anytime we're doing that, the Bible calls it idolatry. Now, the good thing is, anytime we're looking at God with those things, the Bible calls that worship. That's kind of what we want to be about, our heart leaping toward the Lord for that sense of security and satisfaction and hope and happiness. But anytime it's not God, anytime it's one of God's gifts that's inflated to function like a God in our life, that's what the Bible calls idolatry.
Stonegate Church, great to have you join us for another episode of Life Around Stonegate. And there is a lot of life around Stonegate right now. We are right in the middle of our Follow Me sermon series as we're launching what is one of the most significant things we're going to do over the next couple of years in the life of our church. So
yeah, just a few things happening.
Yeah, just a few things going on. So, and I've got with us today two of just the most generous people I know, because that's really what we want to talk about today, is just generosity. So Rodney's with us and preached this Sunday on the Rich Young Ruler. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And then Dave Hansen, who, if you don't know Dave, you should know Dave. He really is one of a kind. But he's also not only a dear friend, but one of the most generous, kind-hearted, wise men that I've ever met. So love having you today. And there's just no way you can have a conversation about the generous life without bringing in Dave Hansen. So definitely want.
So true.
It's
so
fun
true.
to talk about. It's a good conversation. For
Yeah,
sure.
and just to affirm that, Dave, we've known each other now for a long time.
Long time.
And everything Ryan said is true. You're one of those guys who has that combination of the gift of faith and generosity. And I've just been able to witness that now, walking beside you for many years. Being able to just watch the consistent sort of fruit of that gift playing out in your life, which has been an amazing thing for me to watch.
Yeah. I was a young guy when we started.
Younger,
you were a really young guy.
It ages you quick.
That's impressive.
But you know, one of the things that comes to mind, Dave, is I do think there is something about generosity being contagious.
Yeah.
So, and your generosity and your attitude and your heart posture has been contagious.
Yeah.
And I think it's flowed throughout a lot of Stonegate, who we are as a church and what our church looks like. I was even thinking this last Sunday, our kids ministry was doing their big give.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's fun. That's fun
I don't
to
know if
see
you
the
guys
kids.
have seen that over there.
It's amazing to watch. This is one of the things I do love about a generosity initiative. It's not just helping disciple me in giving and our adults in giving, but it's also discipling our young kids to learn to look beyond themselves in their lives. And I love that they're getting, as 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old little boys and girls, they're getting to learn what it looks like to open up their hand and to see. Is Jesus really right when he says it really is more blessed to give than receive? You know, so I love those lessons being learned.
Those are great lessons.
And you're right. If you get to begin to flex that spiritual muscle now, that is so significant for their lives and even just the life of the church. That people are being discipled in that way already. I just find that is so significant. So, So what I'd love to do today is just kind of platform that very topic. Rodney, you preached on the Rich Young Ruler this Sunday, and what a convicting story that is.
Yeah,
you know, and a sobering one too. Yeah. That does cause us to self-assess, hopefully, before the Lord, to sit before the Lord and go, is there anything that would cause me to walk away sad? It's a haunting question.
Yes, it is.
And I'd love if we just tease that out a little bit more of like that question of idolatry. So we introduced that, and maybe there's some folks that's new to them when they're thinking of idolatry in that way. How would you have us think about that?
Yeah. Well, let me back up and just set the context again for the rich young ruler. If you know the story, it's in Matthew chapter 19. He comes up to Jesus with a great question. What must I do to inherit eternal life? Like, that's one of the questions we definitely want to get right in life. We want to know the answer to. And Jesus points him to the law, gives him some commandments, and says, you've got to be perfect, essentially. And it's really a comical moment because the rich young ruler essentially says, well, it's a good thing that's the requirement because I am. And Jesus is like, really? Are you sure? So that's when Jesus says, okay, let's test how perfect you are and let me show you how much you really are going to need a Savior. And Jesus says, go and sell all that you have, and you're going to have treasures in heaven, and then come and follow me. And the rich young ruler just can't do it. He can't walk away from the things that he has in his life, the money and possessions. And that text is showing us one of the multiple things that can really keep us from following Jesus in this area of generosity. And for him, it's that money and possessions had become an idol for him. And we defined an idol as anything or any one of God's gifts that's inflated to function like God in our life. So you just fill in the blank of all the many gifts that God has given us, but it's anytime those things, we're looking at them and our heart is looking at that thing and saying, I need you to produce the security and the sense of significance, me being a somebody, happiness, joy in my life. I need you to produce these things, not God. And anytime we're doing that, the Bible calls it idolatry. Now, the good thing is, anytime we're looking at God with those things, the Bible calls that worship. That's kind of what we want to be about, our heart leaping toward the Lord for that sense of security and satisfaction and hope and happiness. But anytime it's not God, anytime it's one of God's gifts that's inflated to function like a God in our life, that's what the Bible calls idolatry. And for him, the rich young ruler, money and possessions is the thing that had his heart. So
it really is leaning into that very thing, the command toward generosity, that he would be free from being enslaved to money and possessions. And Dave, I'd be curious from your vantage point, like what makes this kind of a particularly really difficult thing for us as followers of Jesus?
I do think it's hard. I loved your sermon this Sunday, Rodney, because it spoke to all those things that you just referenced. Earlier this week, I was reading about the man that walked through a field and found the treasure. And opened the box and it was full of gems and jewels and all these valuable things. And what did he do? He went back. He sold every single thing he had to be able to buy this field with that in there. And then the Lord says, paraphrasing, if you knew who I was, that is what heaven is. You would sell everything you had to walk with me in heaven. And I think this is what I love about the initiative we're doing right now, trying to turn hearts from, I want to own these things, to I know the Lord enough, I love the Lord enough, I know what I've been forgiven of. And I think you can't get away from the gospel if you're going to be generous. And the recognition is, I have been forgiven of so much, and it is his things, and to begin to flex that muscle of, Lord, I want to give these things back to you, all those wrapped in the idols that we have, the possessions that we have. But more than anything, I know for me it's been, gosh, I know what I've been forgiven of. It's astonishing. And that leads me to want to be a man that really invests in the kingdom. And then I think as we've been reading Alcorn, even as we talked about on Sunday, we're at one point in history right now. Our life's 100 years. It's literally a dot on this chronological
so true.
life that we're living. And we have millions of years in front of us. And when God says the most valuable thing you could possess is me, that's something I think we really need to hear. And the only way we hear that is when we actually get in front of him and deepen our relationship with him. So I don't know, I'm just reminded as we go through this, I love the initiative that we're doing because it's not about the money at all. It's about helping people find the Lord, opening their hands and walking out a really generous life that they're then able to put things forward into heaven. So this whole thing, I love what we're doing. It's amazing, and not for the money. The Lord will take care of all those things. But it is for all of us to get a deeper relationship with the Lord and grow in and be people that are open-handed.
It's really so we can be free from the love of money. That's really what we're going for. To be the anti-rich young ruler, to be people who it's just, God, whenever you want it, whatever you want, God, we are a yes to that. And that's so hard to develop and keep and cultivate that type of a heart posture, you know? So
I love that we're kind of deconstructing that for a second, of even deconstructing like how confined we often feel to our particular moment in light of eternity. Like if I can deconstruct that and go like, this moment really is short.
We're finite human beings, so we have a hard time thinking beyond 100 years. That's every reference we've had all of our life. And yet it's inaccurate. We have so much time out in front of us and the opportunity to invest in his things and put them where they can't be corrupt, where they can't be destroyed. It's a great thing.
So maybe I was there on Sunday, or I'm listening now, and I feel like, okay, I'd love to take that leap. I would love to step into generosity. What's on the other side of that leap for someone? What is it like, man, we really are wanting this for you? Like, what is on the other side of a love of money? What's the Lord offering us?
Well, I think it's like many things. I do think it starts with an intentionality. I'm hearing this. It's being taught to me. I'm recognizing there's truth in those things. Now I want to be that intentional person. And it's going to be difficult if you haven't done it before. I think it is hard to begin to open your hands up and take your hands off your possessions. We're all covered up with possessions. That's what we are as Americans. But I think there's something great in beginning to recognize there's a better way, there's a better future in front of me, and being intentional and putting yourself amongst other people that are generous, people that can lead in those things for you and share stories and help you walk out that approach where you begin to say, I do want to have part of it. And I do think generosity, Randy Elkhorn spoke about it, just the joy that comes from once you have given. And that's kind of cliche. It's so much better to give. Well, I think there's great truth to it. There is so much joy in giving things. And when you begin to practice that, I think it leads you to doing that more and more and more. It's like any other muscle you flex. You have to open that. You have to flex it. You have to let go of it. And then what happens in that moment, and I think this is the great thing, you actually see that the Lord is faithful, that the Lord does take care of you. You don't need to worry about what tomorrow is going to bring. You actually are operating in a way that is trusting the Lord. But that doesn't happen until you walk off that cliff a little bit, until you say, well, here we go. You know, it's the Raiders of the Lost Ark moment where you step out there.
The faith bridge,
The faith bridge.
Yeah.
I think there's so much to that.
Yeah.
But the Lord is incredibly faithful and incredibly true to his promises. And I think once we can begin to trust that, it's so much easier to begin to hand things away.
Yeah, so true.
You know, a very, I would say, real stumbling block I think a lot of folks run into is this often involves us being willing to let go of a preconceived notion of how our life was going to go. Because maybe it is of like, well, if I'm going to step into generosity, then that thing's not happening for me next year. Or that thing in the next 5 years, or I'm giving up that preferred future. So I wonder if that becomes the impediment for sometimes, for some people.
Well, I definitely think it plays in. And for some of us, that voice is really loud. You know, it's funny. I've told both of you guys this story in my own life, just in its interaction with ministry. Generally speaking, you don't get into ministry to make money. That's not if that's your goal. This is not typically the direction you want to go in life. And you know, I remember I have two older brothers. So I'm the youngest of three, and every time I would go home, both my older brothers have done really well, kind of in their you know, their life, and both are just doing great. And when I started in ministry, I was making about $30,000 a year. And we were just struggling to make it all happen. And every time I would go home, I would leave there thinking about the rich young ruler, because this is the question I would be, or really the conversation I would be having with the Lord is, God, I think I ruined my life by going into ministry. I think I've ruined it. And so I do think that is a legitimate question. For me, when going into ministry, there was a sacrifice and the giving up of a designer life that took probably a decade of being in ministry to fully let go of. It was just an ongoing journey of surrendering what I thought my life was going to look like compared to what my life is actually look like. And that, you know, that is such a hard moment. We probably all got moments of like working that out. But on the other side of it, it has been so wonderful for me. I looked at Laura. We were just talking about this the other night, and we looked at each other and just said, can you believe our life? That God is letting us do this. I wouldn't trade it for anything, you know? And but man, it did take a hot minute for me to get my hands fully open around the designer life that I had seen for myself, so that I could actually receive with joy the life that God had for me. And I would not, I just wouldn't take that back for anything now.
Amen.
So, yeah.
You know, I think something you said earlier about idols, our life is so filled with so many things that we're pursuing, and it could be any number of things. From all the kids' sports to your job to your fun times, your vacation. I mean, on and on and on. And what happens, and there's something has to give. You can't do it all. And what generally gives for most of us is our time with the Lord. And, you know, I think the thing I've learned over the years, if I am not willing to get in front of the Lord, if I'm not willing to sit with the Lord and be able to discern His voice in my life, it's going to be really hard to open that hand. Because I'm caught up in 1,000 other things. And the Lord takes that back seat. And, you know, I think it's our Christian life in general. We're talking generosity, but until we deepen, greatly our relationship with the Lord. It is hard to do a lot of
Yeah,
those things.
it's
I
so
think it
true.
is.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the parable of the treasure in the field
Yeah.
earlier, and that's such a good description of the exact thing you're saying.
Yeah.
It wasn't until he found the treasure in the field that he could, with joy, sell everything else in
Yeah.
his life so that he could have the treasure.
Yeah.
And Jesus really is meant to be that treasure. And if Jesus isn't that treasure, then nothing is going to flow out of our hands. We're not going to be able to sell anything in our life out of joy to go get the treasure.
No.
You know. So you're so right. It all really does start with and flow from, has Jesus become a treasure worth everything to me?
Yeah.
And once he has, then we really do. It's a lot easier at that point to become a conduit
Yeah.
for these things that God has entrusted to us rather than that cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
So you're right.
Yeah, and one of the I was talking to Jimmy about this on Sunday, and even just I'd never thought about this consideration of the parable of the rich young ruler, and I do think this is it was weighty for me to consider this as I was driving home on Sunday. Was even as the rich young ruler was walking away, literally he's creating separation in space now from Jesus.
Yeah.
So like the voice of the Lord is now getting more distant
Yeah.
and more quiet in his life.
Mm-hmm.
So his disobedience has now led to the distancing and quieting of the voice of the Lord.
Yeah.
So much too of like wanting to hear the voice of the Lord. Like, Lord, I do want to hear you speak. I want to be open-handed. Well, part of it is even just starting in the place where you know he's already called you to obedience.
That's right.
Like instead of going like, well, no, not that area.
Yeah.
Like, give me something else.
Mhm.
But Jesus is like, no, I'm not budging.
Yeah.
Like I've told you this.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear my voice, do what you already know is that first act of obedience.
So true.
Yeah.
You know, we all have things that we're just fine if the Lord asks us. And then we have those set of things that we're not okay. And you're right to say we don't get to pick the place or the exact issue that Jesus is going to ask us first about, you know. And I think you're right to point out in that story how when we refuse Jesus in a particular issue, it's not just that Jesus goes on to other issues. He stays right there waiting for that issue to come back around in your life, you know. And we probably all have stories of how the Lord's done that, of like, Jesus, can we talk about anything else? And he's like, nope, we sure can't, because I want to do this thing in your heart right now. So,
You know, ironically, the Lord wants us to move in faith.
yeah,
And, you know, he says faith without action really isn't faith.
yeah, James, yeah.
And what we end up doing so often is moving in fear. I'm afraid if I don't hang on to this, my retirement's going to be terrible, or I'm not going to be able to do this, or whatever that is. And ironically, fear is the exact opposite of faith.
Yeah, it's anti-faith.
And then what that does, it puts a block between us and the Lord.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to begin, however that looks like, the tiniest way. And I think what you've mentioned is everybody
Yeah.
being involved. And I think
Yeah.
it really does require that first step into faith
Yeah.
will lead to the second step in faith and the third step in faith, where the fear begins to dissipate and the faith begins to grow.
So true.
And it
Yeah.
is a lifelong pursuit.
Yeah. You know, some people have asked me about, should you make a goal 100% of your people, knowing that it's like people are just going to be in a variety of circumstances and situations? And my general response back is, I think we should make that our goal, because I think every single one of us in this moment can find what is that step of faith. It's going to look different for every one of us, but all of us can find what does that step of faith toward Jesus look like right now in your life. And I think, to your point, it's like without taking this small step of faith right now, or big one, whatever it is the Lord has in front of you, the ones behind that are stalled now. They don't happen now because we've said no to this one. And so you're so right in that.
Yeah.
Whatever
Well,
the thing is now.
And I love the widow and the two mites. Who's the one person the Lord picks out? That woman, giving virtually nothing in everybody else's eyes, is the most faithful person in this room.
Yeah.
And he looked at her and said, that is an example we should all follow, because
That's
she
right.
was giving out of the little she had.
Yeah, it was
Trusting the
sacrificial.
Lord for
That's
that.
yes.
She trusted the Lord.
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, and the reason I think 100% participation matters too is I mean, if you boil it down, this really is about dislodging. So, I mean, Jesus he's clear. No one can serve two masters. And Jesus won't take second place to anything. So I think this really is a declaration of worship. It's a declaration
is.
of primacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of like, Jesus, you're first. I know you won't take second. I know you won't take third. You won't be one on the shelf.
Yeah.
So this is a worship declaration of money, you're not first. Comfort, you're not first.
Yeah.
My agenda, you're not first. Jesus, you get to be first.
That's
and
right.
if everyone in our church made that kind of worship declaration, I mean, that's that's incredible for our souls, but also the kingdom of God.
Isn't it?
So much more than, as you were saying, Dave, a number that we're trying to arrive at. But that's a formation work that, man, we could celebrate forever.
I think you hit on something really good, too, and it goes to your sermon Sunday. That rich young ruler was trying to serve two masters.
Yeah, he was.
He loved this. I'm going to do things that have the appearance of being solid in the kingdom, and yet I'm not going to do that. So I'm trying to walk this line between the two of them.
Yeah.
And I think he was called to task on that.
Yeah. And that's why it's like when you have two masters, you're going to find who the real one is when one of them asks you for everything. And that was the moment.
That was the moment.
It's when you have an idol out there, you will only follow Jesus so far, because there is going to be a moment where Jesus says, I want all of you, every bit of you. I want it all. And in that moment, if we have another master that's our actual master, that's going to be the moment that, just like the rich young ruler, we're going to walk away sad from Jesus in that day.
Why don't we wrap up with this? Dave, as I said a second ago, you're one of the most generous people I know. I'd love for you to share a story or two about how practicing generosity has been a blessing to you. Stepping into some of those moments where you really have lived out, it's more blessed to give than receive.
Yeah. Well, there's actually quite a few of them, but I just look back over life, and I think so many times it did feel really hard stepping into moments. They were significant moments. And then watching God use that generosity to build something great. I've worked with several groups around the world, and watching people come to Christ over time, and then being able to talk to those people that have come to Christ over time, it's a pretty amazing thing. Or seeing a child adopted into a family. I've been involved in quite a few of those. And watching this child now in a Christian family, growing in a strong, value-oriented family that loves the Lord. And short of that, they wouldn't have been there. Watching single moms that go through so many troubles, and being able to help those people. All these little things I think are really exciting to watch, and then the big things are really exciting as you watch them develop. The church, what we're doing here at this church, and watching the impact that we'll have over the next, I don't know, 100 years. I don't know what to expect, but I don't think that's crazy to say. Maybe 100 years, this church is still doing great things here. So I think when we all get the mentality of, man, it is truly God's. I truly want to invest this in kingdom, and then watch the things that come from that, and things will be going on long after all of us are gone in this room. I'm going to be the first. But the opportunity to stand in heaven one day and say, I invested in that, and people are still coming to the Lord. People are still finding a relationship with the Lord, and it's just an incredibly joyful, truthful. That doesn't mean it's easy.
No.
I think there are hard moments. I think you have to say what is important, but I can't think of a single moment in my 65 years that I'm not incredibly thankful for having done. So
And isn't that going to be amazing, Dave? I just picture the moment 200 years from now. You're sitting in heaven with Jesus, and Jesus points at another one that just got there. And he's like, this was the fruit of how your investment back a couple hundred years ago is now still weaving its way into forever.
It's
an
exciting.
amazing thing,
It's incredibly exciting, I think. And I do think we have to get a sense of what eternity looks like. It's very hard to do that. But I think when you do begin to say the things we're able to impact today by using his things for his kingdom can alter lives, can alter direction, can impact communities, can impact cities and states, and worldwide moments. They're not something that are just smoke. They actually are occurring out there.
And Ron, I think one thing that's just important for every person that's listening today is to know that it's like these aren't just theoretical things that you're talking about, or I'm talking about, or Dave's talking about. It's like, man, we're in it. I mean, when I think about this moment for Laura and I, it's going to be our most sacrificial, biggest moment of generosity that we've ever had in our life, and it feels scary. It feels all the things. I feel them in this moment. And but I really do believe that Jesus is right when he says it's more blessed to give than receive. I really do believe there's more on the other side of generosity than most of us could ever imagine.
And I think there is something too about we all talk about it, and you want to finish well. But part of also finishing well means to not get weary, before the finish line.
Oh man.
So, and
Yeah.
it can. I mean, I totally get that. Even talking to some folks around our church of like that temptation to become weary. But it's just like, but we're not home yet, and there are people that still need to hear about Jesus and lives we can impact. And it is but a mist. I mean, 1,000 years from now, these 100 years that we get or whatever won't feel like but a minute.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah,
So true.
So, well, speaking of an incredible moment for generosity, I'm really expecting we're going to have a great collective one this Friday night. So for those that have been getting before the Lord, which is once again our encouragement to all of you, this is a good week even to continue to get before the Lord if you haven't done that or still kind of doing that. And to ask, what is sacrificial generosity look like? And if you want to join us, we would love to have you join us this Friday night, 6:30 p.m. for our advanced commitment night. I think it'll be a very significant night for us, a very meaningful night, very memorable night for our church family.
This is one of those nights that for every member at Stonegate, you should totally be there. If you're a leader, if you want to be a part of that crew who wants to go first in our church family, this night is for you. And I think in 5 years from now, looking back, on this year and this season of our church's life, it's going to be one of those don't miss nights that if you'll be there on Friday night, I think you'll look at it in 5 years and you'll be, Dave, do you remember when we were there that night doing that thing?
Yeah.
It's just one of those type of nights. It's really going to be amazing. So.
Those are great moments. I mean, we had one like that with I think about the groundbreaking moment.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's like all those moments out here. So, and I think this will be a lot like that.
We have
really
so many moments that's already occurred.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to be an ongoing
That's right.
situation. So this Friday is going to be amazing.
Yeah. So it'll be this Friday. And then for the rest of you, if any way we can serve you or help you think through these things, have conversations, we're here to serve you guys, to be good pastors and leaders to anyone in our church. So we are here in any way we can pray for you too. Let us know, reach out. And we love you guys. So we're thankful for where the Lord has our church. It's an exciting season.
It's amazing.
It's a fun
Very
season
exciting.
too.
Yeah.
There's so much I feel the Spirit moving in significant ways around our church right now. So we love you guys. We'll see you this Sunday or Friday night and catch you on the next episode.